Welcome to our second webinar series for 2021, where today's topic will be focused on the asset management journey with a great panel of leaders across the water infrastructure industry and to share their journeys within their respective organizations. Water and wastewater infrastructure is essential to keep our waterways clean and our communities healthy. Good afternoon, my name is Bonnie Tam and I am the chair for the IAM Canadian chapter. The IAM's vision is to be recognized as the leading international professional body for asset management. The IAM develops asset management knowledge and best practices and generates awareness of the benefits of the asset management discipline for the individual, organizations, and wider society. I would also like to take the opportunity to remind the audience that our fourth annual general meeting, or AGM, for IAM Canada will take place on Wednesday, July 14th at 4:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This meeting is for all current IAM Canada regular members and will be held virtually with a link to be sent out 2 weeks ahead of the date. I would also like to use the opportunity to announce the establishment of the newly formed Manitoba branch and welcome Suzanne Greenman, who is the leader of that local branch. I now invite Suzanne to provide an update regarding the IAM Manitoba branch.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. Thank you so much. We have a very vibrant branch in Manitoba so far. I mean, we've only started in May, but I can say that our remit is to improve asset management practices in Manitoba by providing a very strong community of practice. We also want to create a very unified voice for asset management in Manitoba and represent the IAM in Manitoba as well. We also want to make sure that we represent Manitoba in the national asset management arenas wherever they might be. So you will see, for example, that today we have Cynthia Ritchie from the City of Winnipeg participating in the panel discussions. So we launched on the 18th of May of this year. And since then, we've completed a planning survey where branch members put forward a list of topics that they're interested in learning about, as well as the format of the sessions that they would like to have for the rest of this year, but also for next year. So next week, we will launch our 2021 schedule based on the requested topics. We expect to host 2 branch meetings, one in September and one in November to close out the year. And then our final activity for the year will be planning for 2022. So all of our events are open to the wider Manitoban community. So anybody who has an interest, once you're in Manitoba, then it's okay. They will also be free for 2021 because they're all virtual. As we mentioned that they're virtual, they're also open to the rest of the public wherever you are. If you want to attend, it's free to attend for everybody for 2021. 2022, we get into more exciting and intense planning, which hopefully will include some face-to-face activities. Thank you so much, Bonnie.
Thank you, Suzanne. And now I'd like to invite Hans Kogel, fellow board director of IAM Canada. And Hans leads all events for IAM Canada. So I'd like to invite him to say a few words. Hans, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you very much, Bonnie. I assume, Eric, you can see my sponsor deck?
We are all good.
Okay, perfect. So I'm not seeing it here, so I just wanted to confirm. So my name is Hans Kogel. As Bonnie mentioned, I am on the board with IAM, serving in the capacity of treasurer, but also serving in the capacity of events management and setting up these events along with a well-seasoned team. And with respect to that, I'd really like to thank all the volunteers that helped out to set up this event and coordinate this event. It does take quite a team of people. and I certainly appreciate that assistance. Also, my thanks goes to the panelists. These are individuals that have a significant knowledge within not only water infrastructure, but also asset management. And they are really committed to advance asset management within their profession, but also within the broader community. And so I would just want to thank each one of the panelists that you'll be hearing from today. In addition, it goes without saying that these events do cost, even though they're virtual, they still have a cost to host. And a big thanks goes to all of our sponsors, and that's Infor, Arcadis, Jen, Greenman, Asset Management Solutions, Planifica, Jacobs, GM Blue Plan, and Copperleaf. And with respect to that, I'd like to introduce one of our sponsors, and that's a gentleman from Infor, and that's Kevin. And Kevin's going to bring a few words to us today regarding his organization.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you very much for allowing us to be able to present. My name is Kevin Price, and I am a technical product evangelist here at Infor. So what that effectively means is our ability to be able to provide the solutions that matter towards this particular industry. If we look at what Infor provides around the space, our target is really towards everything from the very beginning part of the life cycle of water to the end. So it's basically looking at the catchment management systems, treatment, storage, pumping, going into the necessary point of use, and of course going out cleanly and back into the environment. From those solutions, we have learned that there's a lot of uniquenesses to every aspect. Linear assets behave a little bit different from point assets, behave different from complex assets, behave different from within a particular fence, so to speak, to outside the fence. There's a lot of uniquenesses to them, and what we've grown over the years is being able to have solutions that matter at the point of use. And that may happen to be involved in the billing cycle. It could be involved in the licensing cycle. It could be involved in what we do with customer management as well. So as a solution offering within this space, we tend to provide solutions that fit every angle. For this particular event, the Infor organization is really happy to be able to push our asset management solutions. If you look at some of the things that are out there in the space on Infor.com, you'll find some of these case studies and ebooks and white papers and what have you that are out there that will really be helpful to get an understanding of where we're at, what we do. Looking in Canada and some of the customers that we have, looking in the US at some of the customers we have, looking around the world at some of the customers we have. We have some that are domestic. We have some that cross not only the boundaries of individual countries, but entire continents from one particular solution. As a solution set that's offered into the cloud, we're very excited about what we can do and how we can offer it. One of the things that we tend to do that is a bit over the regular board is not only look at the management of the entire process from beginning to end, but ensuring that it's sustainable. It's very important to us that as we start to develop out our solutions, we ourselves operate in a sustainable way, as low cost and low impact as we can to the environment. And as the organizations that are here today to speak to us from the sponsors, from the IAM, or from the folks that are on the panel, this is also something that is critical to their heart as well. Being able to offer sustainable processes and sustainable operations is the protection that we provide not only for ourselves, for our community, but for those that we leave after we've left. Making sure it's a sustainable environment, it's a clean environment, it's important for us. So as you start to think about what we do and where we're at, please get a chance to go to Infor.com, take a look. We're very excited to be able to share what we can with you. That's all I had, just to give you an idea. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Jorgensen, and I am also a member of the Institute of Asset Management Canada branch. And I've got a little job to do today, which is to really try and set the scene for everybody and talk a little bit about what the asset management journey is. So hopefully everyone can see my screen now. I'm having the same issue as Hans there, but the asset management journey, the Institute of Asset Management has really centered a lot of their material around identifying the key points throughout this. There's a YouTube video, it's 5 minutes long, that talks all about this, and it starts at the reactive decision making, goes all the way through to the end. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of subjects today to really set the scene. So at the start of most people's journey, they're in a state of reactive decision making. They're waiting for assets to go wrong, and then they're looking to go out and fix those assets. There's lots of different silos, there's different tribes, there's different languages being talked, but at the same time, everyone thinks that they're doing a great job is often a typical characteristic of where we're at this stage. And when things don't go right, that's when we're looking to blame someone else. It's another department, it's another set of people that aren't doing what they should have been doing. At some point, there's usually a critical mass to change that approach. And it could be a top-down impetus, it could be management of an organization worried that they're going to be put in jail for another critical disaster or a failure of an asset. And it could be bottom-up, the staff, the organizational employees that are talking amongst themselves and deciding that there must be a better way. And quite often there is a better way. And that starts with the collective decision making. And that's when everybody gets together around the same table and starts talking. And it's at this stage where there's quite often a realization of how much you don't know about your organization, how much that you thought somebody else was doing what you thought you were doing, and what the assumptions were, what the data levels were, people thinking that the data was great for certain assets when it's not. So a whole load of new realizations of challenges often happens at this stage. So then there's the choice of, well, what do we do about that? How do we progress this forward? And there's quite a few different things that often happen with an organization. An asset management department quite often gets formed. I love the little comment on this slide around, we've been on a course, now we know what we're doing, we're experts. So that quite often happens. That can often lead to conflict within the rest of the organization who think they know what they're doing with their jobs, and now they're being told how to do it differently. So there's the whole change management aspect that comes into this. And I'm sure today with some of the panelists, that change management idea is going to be a key challenge that they've all faced. The black box idea, the software, the information, the decision-making support systems that are out there, without a full understanding of what they're doing, you may lose confidence in the outputs that are being presented by them. So there's a whole dynamic that happens at this stage where you're trying to understand what the priorities are and what the best path forward is. So the asset management roadmaps and things like that are really sort of become the genesis of this stage of the journey. As you start to get a handle on this, many organizations find that some things start coming together. You start talking the same language in terms of cost, risk, performance. Measures are more standardized and optimized across the organization. And you start moving towards having an optimized decision-making system where many processes become business as usual. So they're not a big project or science experiment to make happen, but they're integrated together. And the different departments are working collaboratively rather than independently within silos. The other thing that's key to this is data. There's a full understanding of what data is needed to support decisions throughout the organization. So where there may be some people that are collecting that data, not for their own purpose, but they understand the value of that data. So they become treating data as an asset in its own right. So they're taking real good care of that data, knowing that it's supporting future decisions and decisions by other departments. The common data standards really is a foundational piece to this stage. The apple to apple scenario in the bottom right of this slide is one of my favorites there, where you can really start to compare different priorities of different assets, even if they're not in the same asset class. That's what we're talking about when we get into there. and what it all relates to, where we want to end up with this journey, is being able to manage our risk to the assets within an organization to the extent that you're not having to react and work to unplanned programs. You know what you're going to be doing, you know how much you need to spend and when. And what that means is that you're not firefighting, and then you have more time for long-term planning within the organization. So you get really this opportunity to enhance the efficiency of the organization and the assets. So you're driving the best value out of the assets. And that's really the end goal of asset management. And I say end goal in terms of the journey, but as it relates to here, that there is no end. The continual improvement is just that. It just keeps going. So when we talk about traits of great asset management organizations, you have that top-down impact. So the managers, the leaders of an organization are truly believing the concepts of asset management and are on board with it. They're facilitating the resources required and giving the staff the power to be able to enable this. The concept of continuous improvement I just mentioned, so the journey doesn't end, it just gets better and better, and whether that's through data, through processes, it just keeps going, and the integrated decision making, and that can be for asset intensive organization. You can be looking at many different assets, thousands, millions of assets, covering many different asset classes, and trying to compare and prioritize a library with a road in terms of dollars spent. And that's where we want to try and get to, is to understand what assets, what infrastructure needs the most investment and when. And then there's the fluid flow of information. What we're talking about there is the information you need to make decisions is accessible to everyone within the organization at any time. So there's not a project required in order to do the analysis to populate certain parameters or performance measures. It's there, it's business as usual is the term that we would call that. And then information is an asset in its own right. So treat it with the care it deserves, make sure it's collected in the proper manner so that it can be used for its intended purpose later on. Check out the little video on YouTube. It's a really good one. And then the Institute of Asset Management website itself has got a ton of information around the journey, and as well as the anatomy of asset management is another key document which provides a great overview of all the things that we're going to be talking about here today. I kind of ended our journey talk around optimized decision making. So I'd like to introduce to you now Rob Corazzola from Arcadis Gen, who specialize in the provision of decision support software for asset management. So I'll pass over to you, Rob.
Thanks, James. I really appreciate that. Just going to show my screen here, and hopefully just get a nod that we can see this.
All good, Rob.
Thank you. And James, I love that. Ever since the IAM produced that chart, I've been a big fan of it because I can relate to it with so many different examples of organizations and where they're at on that journey. But I really appreciate you setting the stage here. So my name is Rob Corazzola. I'm the Director of Sales for Arcadis Gen North America, and we're very pleased to be a sponsor for the IAM water panel discussion. I'm very keen to listen in on the panelists, but right now I just want to tell you a little bit about Arcadis Gen and who we are and what we do. So with that, just advance the screen. Move this over here. So Arcadis Global is a management consultancy or design and consultancy firm, along with the digital business, employing about 28,000 professionals. You can see that our solutions are delivered across sector, through infrastructure, through the environment, through water, through buildings. Albeit, even though the water sector is an area that only represents, at least in this snapshot, 12% of the net revenues, it's probably the most asset management focused organization or business line. In the last 5 years, we've probably completed over 100+ asset management engagements in the water sector. But definitely that's changing going forward as we start to look at a lot of sustainability and resiliency initiatives. But some interesting facts here. Just move this out of my way here. Sorry about that. Arcadis North America's consultancy, as I mentioned, has a very rich and strong consultancy practice when it comes to asset management in the water sector. Much of the work of late has been in the resiliency and sustainability space, very topical trend these days. Arcadis Gen, the business line that I work for, despite being a startup in January 2020, has over 250 staff globally dedicated to commercial digital asset management solutions. The former Seams product for decision support and asset investment planning is now under the Arcadis Gen organization, labeled as Enterprise Decision Analytics. And this is a solution that has been recognized by research analysts like Gartner, AMCL, and Bluefield in the water sector as a top asset investment planning provider globally. We take a lot of pride in long-standing relationships. I know James and I were talking about some of the water companies in the UK. We've done a lot of work in there with organizations like Severn Trent, who has been an Arcadis client for over 15 years, supporting their regulatory submissions, but also doing some amazing things that are tied to sustainability and climatic events and water demand, to the point where we've actually worked with them on a tool that helps them really predict the future water demand and the impact on the assets due to climatic change. So at the bottom, you can see some of the other organizations we work with in the water sector. A lot of these are in the UK, in the EU, and in North America. So what does Gen do? I'm not going to go through all of these, but much like Kevin, we're kind of into the EAM space as well. Kevin and the Infor organization. We provide EAM solutions across various sectors. We provide analytics tools or asset investment planning tools. But we also provide applied insights. And I'll talk about that a little bit at the end, but they're very lightweight subscription-based tools that many organizations are looking to adopt these days. So some of the trends that we've observed, or at least Arcadis has observed in the water sector, you'll be familiar with these. Certainly our panelists will be. Aging infrastructure and data are challenges. OpEx, trying to get a handle on the expenditures in the operational area and trying to optimize those. The adoption of technology has been a bit of a hindrance in this sector. For utilities, and in many cases, they just don't have the resources to support the use of a lot of the new technologies. The silver tsunami, many of us are familiar with this. Certainly I'm part of that age group, but the water sector is facing a major wave of retirements, and obviously that leads to a loss of a lot of institutional knowledge that typically may not be captured elsewhere. And lastly, I think another, back to the climate change and resiliency, there's increasing global temperatures, greater melts, climatic events, and droughts that are certainly impacting many, many different things. And I've managed to do a little bit of research on this and found some really cool things. But the impact of, a half a degree Celsius and what that means to many different things, like the weather or insects or people or just the sea level rise itself. Currently, since 1880, the global temperature has increased by more than 1 degree Celsius. I think we're about 1.3 degrees Celsius right now. So this chart kind of illustrates, if we hit 1.5, what the potential impacts could be versus even 2 degrees Celsius. And you could imagine what the impacts are against the infrastructure and the assets that support a lot of the services we're used to. In fact, I found this, which was quite astonishing to me as well, as this is coming from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, but the sharp rise in costly resilience shocks, i.e., severe storms, winter storms, wildfires, freezes, and flooding, are just phenomenal in the last decade or so. I mean, the fact that in the 2010s, we saw an average of a $12 billion disaster each year, which is up from about only 3 per year in the 1980s. It's just astonishing, these numbers. And obviously the ongoing stressors like aging assets only increase the strain of each shock. So this is a very, very important topic to, for asset managers these days. So with that, Arcadis Gen is really taking a look at some of these trends and, around sustainability and resilience. And like Infor, like Kevin's company, as an organization, we take it very seriously, the way we operate, the way we engage with our clients. But we've decided to really kind of try and get, the tools in the hands of organizations that may have, kind of fallen behind on adopting technology, may have lost a lot of the institutional knowledge, aren't quite ready for a heavy lift in implementing major applications, and have launched this marketplace of applied insights. And what these things are really lightweight, subscription-based tools in the cloud that any organization can consume as they wish. There's no implementation, there's online training, there's data quality embedded in these tools, and they're very targeted to things like optimizing above ground assets or, pipe failure prediction. And coming soon to the marketplace, we're going to be dealing with carbon impact optimization, fleet to zero, flood risk calculators. The interest level in these applications is significant, and I wish we had these 20 years ago for the organizations that I was working with. Nevertheless, enough about Arcadis Gen. I want to thank you for allowing us to present our information. We hope you enjoyed the seminar today, and please stay safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Actually, it's a very interesting topic. Both myself, James, and I were actually just having a conversation on climate adaptation and asset resiliency just earlier this week. So this is definitely a hot topic, and we're going to see more of this type of topic in our North American conference later in this fall as well. So today, joined with me to co-moderate is again my partner in crime here, James, is going to join me to co-moderate. And I would like to now use the opportunity to thank and introduce our panel for today. Okay, just waiting for Chris. Chris, maybe just to turn on your camera. Great, perfect. So thank you for our panel for today. Just a brief introduction first before we get into the panel itself. From the West Coast to the East Coast of Canada, I'd like to introduce Chris Wu, Asset Manager for Metro Vancouver. Lindsay Hall, Engineer within Asset Management Strategy for EPCOR Water Services. Cynthia Ritchie, Corporate Asset Management Specialist, City of Winnipeg. And Valerie Williams, Manager from Asset Management, Halifax Water. As a reminder to our audience today, if you have any questions, please go to the GoToWebinar platform box in front of you and submit your questions online, okay? And at the end of this panel, we will have an email address that Eric will share. So in the event that we didn't have a chance to tackle your question, or if you have any additional ones, please do not hesitate to send in your questions to that email. And shortly after this panel is over, we will be publishing the recorded version to our IAM members on the site directly. So to begin, I'd like to invite our panel to introduce your organization a bit, and then to also probably introduce where your organization currently is within the asset management journey. So to start us off, I invite Chris Wu to introduce your organization.
Sure. Thanks, Bonnie, and the organization team. My name is Chris Wu. I'm a lead senior engineer for Metro Vancouver's Integrated Asset Management Group. So our group is responsible for developing strategies and methodologies to support, Metro Vancouver to implement an effective and efficient asset management practices. And also our team manage and support asset management systems and tools to collect, store, and analyze different asset data for analytics and decision making, and also support the work management side of things. So that's me and my group. In terms of Metro Vancouver, we are a local government that serves 2.7 million populations in the region, and they're in 23 member jurisdictions that consist of 21 municipalities, 1 First Nation, and 1 electoral area. And we have main utility services like water services and wastewater services. We call liquid waste services in here. But we also we provide solid waste services, affordable housing, the regional parks, air quality, and regional planning. So that's what Metro Vancouver does for the region. In terms of the asset management journey, about a decade or two ago, we treated asset management as a sort of discrete discipline, even though, I believe asset management started when, the asset was created very early in their lifetime. We just didn't call it asset management. And also we organized the dedicated groups for liquid waste services and water services about 6 years ago. But now this year we formed a centralized integrated asset management office. So I'm very, very excited to see this reorganizations. In terms of the journey itself, we developed our first strategic asset management plan in 2016. That's at the department level for water and liquid waste services. And also our board approved the departmental asset management policies in 2018 and 2019. In last few years, we developed some of the initial frameworks around levels of service, asset assessment that includes condition and performance assessment on our assets, risk assessments and asset registry, the corporate asset hierarchy, like the backbone of how the data should be stored in our systems. And even though not all of these frameworks are fully implemented, but I think we believe we built a very strong, building blocks to proceed and continue our journey. And last but not least, we have asset management IT systems. So Info EAM is our CMMS, and also we use GIS for linear assets. And also there are other, enterprise repository that support asset management work. So yeah, we are very excited to continue our journey. It has been very interesting and challenging last few years. But yeah, we are very excited to continuously improve our asset management activities and journey. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Chris. That was a great introduction, and it seems like you guys are really touching on all the different aspects. So that's awesome. Lindsay, let's hear about EPCOR Water Services.
Sure. My name is Lindsay Hull. I work for EPCOR Water Canada in Edmonton, and I'm actually based out of our wastewater treatment plant. EPCOR Water Canada as an entity provides water and wastewater services to more than 85 communities and industrial sites in Alberta, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan. In Edmonton, we are responsible for all of the water facilities. So we've got 2 water treatment plants, 1 wastewater treatment plant, and also the water distribution and transmission system, as well as the drainage network. So we handle the entire water cycle within the city of Edmonton. We also supply water to many communities and counties in the greater Edmonton region. EPCOR really started on our asset management journey about 10 years ago. At that time, the focus was on providing increased value to our regional clients. This eventually, kind of about the same time frame, expanded to the development of a centralized asset management office, which created an asset management framework for the Edmonton sites. Over the years, the asset management office has evolved into a central group that provides and maintains the asset management framework and provides general support. And then the responsibility for the specific asset management plans, the creation, the management update, has been distributed to the different operating locations. So again, what we may be doing at the wastewater treatment plants is slightly different than what they'll be doing at the water treatment plants, which will be, again, slightly different than what they'll be doing at either water, D&T, or drainage. Again, you're dealing with plant assets versus linear assets, but we are all coming back to the common framework, the common risk structure, and I guess the common language. We're not there yet, but one of our eventual goals is, because we're trying to work from a common basis across the entire Edmonton region, is we'd ideally like to be able to get to the point where we can compare, does it make more sense to invest money into water plants versus wastewater treatment versus distribution or drainage. We're not quite there yet, but we're working on it. So that's kind of where we're at. Yeah.
Great, and I love the fact that you're using the word common, right? Like apples to apples, and then you can really make informed decisions. So it's great that you guys are starting with that type of foundational of standardization of the language and the definitions. Awesome. So Cynthia Ritchie, tell me about City of Winnipeg.
Okay. I currently work in the corporate asset management office, but prior to that role, I worked in the asset management systems for the city's 3 wastewater treatment plants. Characterized by a very diverse population and a steadily it is the dominant.
Cynthia,
Yep.
your video is a bit glitchy right now. Do you want to maybe try turning your video stream off to save some bandwidth? Hopefully we'll be able to hear your audio better. It's just a bit in and out.
Okay.
I know it's raining cats and dogs, as they say in Winnipeg right now.
So yeah, maybe that's a little better.
Oh, much better.
Today to pour. Well-established practice. We have dedicated asset management professionals across and very well-established investment planning process.
I think we're still having some technical challenges with Cynthia's audio as well. Is it just me or James?
No, it's still very choppy. I'll ask our behind the scenes person, Eric, if you can maybe, is there a phone number that Cynthia could call in on? And while we try to do that, let's move over to Val to introduce herself.
Hi, Valerie. If you can also introduce Halifax Water and where you guys are within the asset management journey, that'd be great.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. I'd like to start by acknowledging that Halifax Water is in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And I'm Val Williams. I'm the manager of asset management and capital planning here at Halifax Water. I'm very honored to be on this panel today, so thank you for inviting me. Halifax Water is a regulated water, wastewater, stormwater utility. We became that in 2007, but prior to that, Halifax Water was operating as a utility since 1945. We have about 525 employees, and we are still growing even through the pandemic, which is wonderful. We have approximately 105 customer accounts that serve about 375,000 people. In terms of my group, the Asset Management and Capital Planning team, we look after the long-range infrastructure planning as well as the implementation of our asset management program. So under the infrastructure planning, we look at the long-term master planning over a 30-year horizon for our water, wastewater, stormwater infrastructure. And then we also have some supporting programs that assist us with that. So our hydraulic modeling and our corporate flow monitoring program. On the asset management side, we put together the annual asset management plan and also put together the annual and 5-year capital budget. And part of the work that my AM team does is the inspection, carries out the contracted inspection for sewer condition assessment. So those are kind of that's what we do in my team. In terms of our asset management journey, I would say we've been doing, effective utility management really since the onset of the entity, but in a more formal capacity, probably for the past 10 years when we did our first AM assessment and had a roadmap coming out of that. We started to implement some of the recommendations, and at the time we were looking for some rate adjustments at our utility and review board, which prompted a more fulsome look on the long-term planning side of things. And so we parked our AM program for the time being while we worked on our long-term planning framework. And then once that was complete, we were able to start rolling in some of the AM work again and been moving forward. So generally speaking, I would say we're still fairly early in the overall AM maturity spectrum, but like probably most of the panelists here, we have quite a range of where we are depending on which department we're dealing with and which group of folks that are kind of up and running on their particular area of expertise. So.
Great, thank you, Valerie. And I'm just checking to see if Cynthia, are you back online? I think it's always the challenge of the virtual webinars, and we're always challenged with the reliability of telecom too. So that should be one of our panel discussions, James, is the telecom.
Yeah, that could be next. I think we've got a utilities one coming up, don't we, Bonnie?
Yes, that's right.
I think we're getting a cell access number sorted out for Cynthia, so hopefully she should be able to join soon. It sounded suspiciously like the cell phone. Okay, we'll sit tight for Cynthia to join, but until then, we'll get stuck into some of the questions that we had in the discussion. So we've got almost 100 people on the webinar right now, and we've got over an hour to discuss the asset management journey with you guys. And so I think let's start with the benefits of what you hope to achieve. Obviously, in the journey that I mentioned, there's the optimized decision making. But what are you guys in it for? And if you maybe look at it from a short-term perspective, so what have you got happening right now that you want to try and achieve in the next year or two? And what do you want to get to in the next sort of 5 years? Where's your sort of key benefits that you want to get towards? And maybe let's start with Lindsay.
Just let me unmute myself. In the short term, I would say what we're looking to do is specifically on asset renewal and replacement in kind. Generally, we know that every 5-year planning cycle, we need a bucket of money for mechanical replacements and electrical replacements. But at this point, it's just a bucket of money. And then we kind of figure out exactly what's going to happen as we're working through that 5-year period. On the long-term planning scale, in terms of changes of regulation, changes of technology, capacity upgrades, we've got a pretty defined plan that goes out, kind of 10 to 15 years where we can say, here's the projects we want to do. But for the asset renewal, where this equipment is at end of life, it's in poor condition, it needs to be replaced, we want to get to the point where we're not surprised by what's failing. And we're getting to things before they actually fail. Whereas now, typically what happens, we have our pot of money for, let's say, mechanical rotating equipment replacements. We know we've got X dollars every year to spend, but it's, oh, these pumps don't look very good, so let's hurry up and do all our engineering and get everything done and then get the approvals. And so every time we go to request the funds for those types of programs, we're really just guessing at how much we need. And it's based on historic. So, we always get $5 million for pumps. what we'd like to get to in the next, hopefully within the next, I guess, rollover of our planning cycle is to be able to say, here are the 10 pumps that we're predicting are going to need to be replaced as replacement in kind. We're not there yet, but we're hoping kind of our next big planning cycle will be 2024 to 2029. We're hoping by the time we put that application together, we'll be able to include those lists of equipment rather than just pumps.
Okay, I like it. So before we move on to someone else for their sort of key benefits, what are you doing to try and get there, Lindsay? How are you going to get to the point where you can work out which of the 10 pumps need to be top of the list and how much they're going to cost?
Right now, what we're doing is really focusing on our asset data. So when was this equipment installed? What condition is it in? And how long do we expect it to last? Then also looking at relative criticality. If there's something that, again, we've got X dollars, but maybe we have Y dollars worth of equipment that might need to be replaced, prioritizing within that. So identifying which equipment we can't run without and which equipment we can limp along with, and what we're willing to repair versus what we must have to be reliable. So focusing on data and criticality to help prioritize our spending.
Makes sense. Sounds good. Maybe let's jump to Chris. I'm just going around my screen as I see it here. So Chris, some of the key benefits that you're hoping to get out of your asset management practices.
Yeah, for sure. So we definitely have, short, medium, long-term goals and benefits that we're trying to achieve. And we are sort of tackling sort of everything in sort of parallel streams. But immediately, what we are trying to do is we want to collect all the core asset information and store it in a robust asset registry, so that we can enable transparent and effective sort of asset reporting around the state of what that asset is in, like the condition, inventory, and replacement cost. But eventually, with all that sort of fundamental information in place, we really want to achieve the evidence-based decision-making around infrastructure investments. We have significant spending in the next decade or two, like we're talking tens of billions of dollars. And then these are sort of from needs from aging infrastructure, regulatory requirements, and improved efficiency, effluent quality, building new treatment plants. So it's very important for asset management perspective to provide justifications of why we're needing these much spending in the next few years, and that will really come from the asset informations that we should have in sort of one place, the single source of truth concept, and also that will enable this effective and efficient utility management sort of the value chain that starts with the asset data, how the service performance can be measured using that asset data, and how that will drive decision making and also infrastructure investment planning and implementations that includes refurbishments and replacement. I think that's what Lindsay was referring to. And also it kind of comes back into the asset maintenance and operation world that will generate further asset data, and it's like a big sort of circular value chain that we should sort of continuously improve. And that's sort of our sort of utopian state in the next 5 or 10 years to achieve these benefits from our asset management journey.
Yeah,
Great.
So let's not carry on, Bonnie. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so before we go to Valerie, I was just trying to also ask, like, since you guys already kind of enacted some of these pieces of maturing your asset management capabilities, do you already realize some benefits besides the long-term benefits? Have you already started seeing some of these benefits already?
Yeah, sure. So without having 100% mature asset registry, we were able to implement some of the hierarchies for some of the asset classes. We have 17 asset classes across water and liquid services, and using that sort of the common structure, we were able to sort of forecast the expenditure needs. So we are heavily relying on the Excel spreadsheet to create tools to monitor and forecast this type of spending. And we are using it to communicate, at least for internally, to talk to our senior managers about, there is this much spending coming up in the next 5 to 10 years, and we have to allow some sort of allowances in our capital plan, even though we don't know exactly what assets that needs to be replaced in the next 5 to 10 years, but at least we have a sort of a consolidated level of allowances, both for water and liquid waste services, that will sort of better prepare us when the time comes to renew these assets.
Great, thank you. And Valerie, what are some of your anticipated benefits in the asset management journey?
Yeah, tons. And I like that Chris used the word utopian view of things, because I feel like we often have this grand view, but the reality is very hard to realize. So, but I don't think you can achieve anything if you don't have that utopian view. So I think it's very important. And I am a very optimistic planner, and I am often told that I am trying to do far too much at once. So I'll give you my immediate list, which you'll probably say, oh my goodness, that's way too much work. One of the things that we would really like to do is look at our policy. We have an asset management policy that's been drafted, but it really needs to have more teeth and be endorsed by our senior leadership team as well as our Halifax Water Board. I think that would go a long way in helping us kind of embed some of the principles that we're trying to achieve in our program throughout the organization. So that's a key item that I hope to do in this year. We have just been redoing our roadmap, so we are reviewing the final product right now, and then have to develop the actual implementation plan for that, which will be over multiple years. And of course, I have to take my optimistic lens off to make it a bit more realistic in terms of actual delivery, but that's something that we're working on this year. One of the things that I think is really important is the engagement with our other departments. And so we have often worked kind of in isolation, despite a lot of best efforts to try and bring others into the fold. But we have asset management implementation teams that have been up and running for about 1.5 years now, and we're starting to see some really great benefits from having that collaborative conversation between the asset management folks, the engineering teams, and our operations team. So I'm quite optimistic that there's going to be a lot of change this year as we really start digging into that and having some really meaningful conversations that are then going to help support some of the work that we need to do that's a little bit longer term, which is getting into condition assessment, performance assessment. What do we need to do? What level of detail do we need to go to? We need to have that collaborative conversation and not have one group dictating it, rather than kind of having a group approach at the end of the day. I'm currently working on some level of service work that's driven internally, and connecting the dots between kind of our corporate mission and vision to the service standard work that's been done already, and making sure that everything kind of maps back to, why are we here? We're here to provide water, we're here to treat water, that sort of thing, but making sure everything connects back. So that's a nice little exercise that we're working on. Prioritization is another area. So I think I heard people talking about, how do I prioritize what needs to be done both across the industry, across our organization, but also within an asset class, and how do we come up with a methodology that kind of normalizes all that? So we've got a draft of that. It's kind of ready to have the tires kicked, and then we're going to test it with our capital budget process in the fall and find out all the warts and things that need to be changed. But that's another piece that's in the works. And then, longer term, building in things like climate impacts, and how does that get enrolled into all of the work that we're doing with our long-term planning, as well as our regular asset management planning, building that right into our AMPs. And the, what's the other one? Oh, yes, we have been doing an asset management plan for about 5 years. The first one was a bit like Swiss cheese, lots of holes, lots of gaps in the data, made best judgments on the information that was in front of us. I feel like we're in a really good place today for predicting, putting a projection forward for where we sit, a good repair, and then our, our projection forward. There's still room for improvement, and we'd like to start layering in multiple interventions rather than just end of life replacement, which is where we sit right now. But the piece that's kind of missing is the overarching asset management strategy, or the strategic asset management plan. So I see that being something that we do in the, I would call it near term, but not this year. So that's kind of it for us.
Great, thank you, Valerie. And I love the fact that you touched on, the importance of organizational change management. I always look at, asset management transformation first and foremost is the people transformation side of things, and it's really, changing the culture, changing the behaviors, and those are so important in order for you to break down those silos. And it's typically something that, it's easier said and it's very challenging to actually roll out. So then, speaking of challenges, do you, Lindsay and Chris, do you see similar types of challenges with respect to, organizational change management or other types of challenges in your asset management journeys that you'd like to share?
Do you want me to start
Sure.
on that one?
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Oh, I was just going to say, one of the challenges we have is it's been a very patchy adoption. So we will have some people in some group who are, yes, totally gung-ho, they're running with it, and away they go. And then we've got other people in other groups who are maybe not so engaged. So it's been very uneven across the entire organization, which it kind of ties back to our data management issues, because you have some groups where your asset data passes, from your capital group to your operations group to your maintenance group to your engineering group. And some of those groups are, like I said, very gung-ho and they do a great job. And then it maybe passes to a group that isn't quite as bought in yet. And so the data kind of falls off. And so you kind of have this like lurching back and forth momentum where one group is running and another group is not quite as bought in. So again, trying to show everybody the value of it is one of our big sort of focus areas for the next little while. And even it could be something as simple as I had some feedback the other day from the group that is responsible for closing out all of our capital projects, where we've made a big focus on getting installation dates of equipment. And the feedback from that group was, hey, it's so easy to close out projects and figure out, is this asset fully depreciated or not, because we know exactly when it was installed. And so you're able to tie, that's why this date is important to their job. And so trying to do more and more of that and showing everybody why all of this touches their individual jobs and how it can help them. And it's not just some random ask from a group in, central corporate that nobody really knows exactly what they do. So
the groups that are less on board, Lindsay, why are they not as engaged? And beyond trying to show them, the benefit of it, what else have you tried, or what else can you do to get them on board?
Generally, like the plant that I specifically am based out of, there's a big effort on. It's a relatively small site for EPCOR, with a relatively small and close-knit group of people. So we do have monthly, basically, town halls. So the asset management group presents at those, and just trying to relate it to people. Everyone has a vehicle or a home or something that they own that is an asset. And the principles of asset management, whether it's your house or your plant or your digester or your clarifier, they're essentially all the same. If you have a home and you maintain your furnace, you see the benefit of that. Whereas if you have a plant and you maintain the equipment, you also see the benefits of that. So trying to just that communication piece, and like Valerie said, the change management piece. So here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, and then hopefully people can see the value in that.
Okay, cool, thank you. So yeah, Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about your challenges and maybe on that same idea? And we've just had a question come in which relates to what we're talking about, is how you would influence your corporate culture to see assets as, to see knowledge as an asset in itself, to see the data as an asset in itself, like what we talked about in the journey. So it's similar, related there. So maybe touch on that, Chris.
Yeah, sure. I think Lindsay and even Valerie touched on some of the challenges that we had. But really, I want to summarize our challenges in sort of two buckets. One is related to sort of the robust governance model around, facilitating and implementing asset management. And the second area is the data and technology. So in terms of, the governance model, until we just went through the most recent rework that centralized all the asset management functions into one group, we serve different GMs who had different priorities and different interests and then concerns, right? They have their own sort of day-to-day fire to extinguish, right? So it was very hard to communicate the value of asset management and the proceed according to the work plan, because of that gap between different departments. So having a robust governance model is definitely a key in my opinions, and that will also enable more effective communications around the vision on the asset management and also the work plan and focus area. And also having sort of the common space of defining the boundary and what really asset management means. I think that's really important for us because a lot of people sort of confused around what is asset management? Is it just reporting on condition and replacement costs, or is it does it include all the maintenance and operation of our assets to get the value out of it, right? So all those sort of common understanding of asset management can be achieved by having this common sort of the committee per se that consists of senior managers, and so that the consistent message can go in and out. So that's around the governance model, and I think that can remove some of the silos that we had in terms of one group wants to be more of a gung-ho versus the other group is more passive around engaging asset management, right? So that's the first sort of area of challenges. The second area of challenges is the data and technology. I'm sure all the panelists and all the audiences in the call having very similar issues. For us, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have a good asset registry with all the asset data in one place. So we manage a lot of temporary asset registry in someone's desktop. For example, our watershed assets are in one spreadsheet versus our reservoir asset registries is in another spreadsheet. So that has been very challenging for us as a facilitator group to first know where those local databases are, and also even though we know where they are and what they are, it's hard to sort of compare one asset class with the other because they're all in different format and in hierarchy. So, and also around the data confidence, we don't know the maturity of those data and whether that's repeatable and how correct those data are, right? And around technology, we don't have a good sort of corporate asset management repository. So we are, one of the key initiatives that we're taking on is review our asset management systems, which is currently the Info EAM. So that started as our CMMS, but the issue was it was implemented about 10 years ago. It was like a like-for-like implementation with its predecessor. So right now it's really just a work order management tool, and it limits a lot of capabilities that it can have with full functions. I mean, Kevin definitely will agree to that statement because we confirmed that Info EAM is one of the the primary asset management tools out there. And that limited capability drove this sort of negative perceptions and usage of the tool. So we really wanted to confirm that limitation of the tool or how can we improve the experience with the current tool, and whether that requires full reimplementations or replacement of the tool. And of course that comes with the entire business process and pain point review to best find the software and the application of the software. So I mean, that's sort of the key challenges that we're facing at Metro. So sorry, James, well, your questions around.
That was a good response there, Chris. So one question I had around your governance framework. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense to document roles, responsibilities in order to know who's going to be doing what. Is that something that you did yourselves, or was that an outside consultant that helped you with that? I think the audience might be interested to know how you actually go about doing a governance framework.
So it's still ongoing, and I don't want to say we have fully established governance framework in place. Like with this reorganizations, we are internally, discussing and assessing what's the best structure to go about this governance model. And also, we had several sort of gap assessments around asset management, and a lot of sort of recommendations is around building a good sort of platform to communicate on asset management. So that's still ongoing, and we may hire another consultants to sort of hone in on, with this restructuring, what's the best sort of way of communicating and structuring asset management communications. So I guess we sort of went through both the internal discussion as well as external help from the consultants.
Awesome, and it looks like we've got Cynthia back.
Awesome. Welcome back,
awesome.
Cynthia. Yeah,
So,
thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, we can see you. The system's working. This is good. So maybe let's just give Val a quick opportunity to respond to the challenges question. We'll come to you, Cynthia, for a bit of an intro on the city of Winnipeg and where you're at, and we'll give you an opportunity to catch up on the questions that you've missed.
Okay, thank you, and apologies.
No worries. Val.
So I thank you, James. I think it's interesting that I'm hearing common challenges from both Lindsay and Chris, and ironically, those are a couple of those are the things that I've written down. So one thing I will also say is and I'm sure that everyone is feeling the same pinch, but there's a lot of competing priorities, and so this tends to get pushed to the back burner. But that is one of the challenges in general. The asset management team sits inside our engineering and technology services group, but it performs a corporate function. But because of where it sits in the organization, it is viewed as a small initiative or something that has a fixed start and end date, rather than as asset management, as a management system or a way of doing business. So that's been a bit of a challenge, and I'm starting to see a change in that thinking, which is wonderful. So, and I think part of that is coming from our exercise in levels of service, the work we're doing on risk, and a number of other things. So I think that conversation to broaden the perspective is starting, which is really quite positive. The other challenge is data. And so when I think about data, it's collecting data for a purpose, making sure that we're collecting what we need and really not more than what we need, because there's a maintenance aspect of data. Data is an asset. We treat it as an asset. We collect a ton of information. We use it for our sewer inspection program and use that to guide decisions on rehab and reinvestment. We collect flow monitoring information that we use for calibrating models, for doing pre and post examinations of II reduction programs, but we collect a ton of data. So part of it is, are we collecting the right data? Are we giving the right access to the data to the people that need to be making the decisions? And do people even know that this data is being collected? So these are big issues. The other piece on the data is currency. Currency is so vital, and it means nothing if I did a condition assessment project 5 years ago today. That means nothing. If I haven't done anything to keep that information current, that's a huge loss for us as an organization, and an unfortunate, I call them data near misses. It's an opportunity that we walked by. We walked by that tripper that the next person is going to fall down the stairs because of, and we didn't take the opportunity to collect that data when we were there. So in that vein, one of the things we're doing is we have an asset condition project, which is focused not on the actual condition information, but on the process around keeping information current. And what we're actually doing is exploring who in the organization is interacting with the assets on a regular basis, and how can we leverage that as an opportunity to collect the information we need without overly burdening them and creating something that's difficult for them. And I think there's a technology overload for some of our operations staff. They've got the work management system, but this isn't what they do on a regular basis, and they keep being asked to do more. So through this asset condition project, the idea came with just create tick boxes that they just have to tick, and then we transform that tick into that yields a condition grade. So we have to design the input so that we get the output we're seeking. So there's a lot of work on our part to do that, but I think data is key. I think data is one of the biggest challenges that we have.
Absolutely. When you mentioned around the idea of the data near missing, collecting the data while you're there, it reminded me of our transportation webinar that we had, where they're putting cameras on garbage trucks to take pavement condition inspections. Yeah, it's like you're collecting the data you need, but not for the way that it was collected wasn't the design, the designed approach in the first instance. I like that a lot. Okay, Cynthia, hopefully we've got stable connection. So yeah, a little bit about City of Winnipeg and where you're at, please.
Okay. All right, so I guess I'll just start over since I'm not sure where I cut out. So as I said, I work in the corporate asset management office currently, but I did work for quite some time in wastewater services, where a large part of my role was implementing asset management systems for the wastewater treatment plants in Winnipeg. A little bit on Winnipeg. It's the 7th largest city in Canada, very diverse population and a steadily growing economy. Roughly 56% of our population in Manitoba lives in the city, so it is our dominant economic, social, and cultural driver within the province. As far as where the City of Winnipeg is with our asset management practice, it's fairly well established. We have professionals across the organization, across the departments, and established processes. We have a policy and admin standard and well-established investment planning processes and asset management plans. We did recently complete our first strategic asset management plan, which is very exciting. And I'll kind of wrap that into, trying to address some of the challenges, because listening to everyone talk about their various challenges, those are, very real challenges that we experience as well. Just nodding basically when everybody's talking. So some of the things we're planning to focus on over the next 3 years using our SAMP is we need to establish levels of service. We don't have formalized or council approved levels of service at this point. We want to improve our risk approach, and then asset information. That's a big one for us. So lots of plans to work on our asset information systems to be able to improve our asset management plans and also better connect our plans with our longer term financial planning.
Awesome, I like that. And then, so in terms of the challenges you're looking similar, what would be the biggest of the list for you right now that faces you in the next year or so, Cynthia?
Sorry, that was challenges in the next year?
Yeah, like what's the key thing you're working on right now, and how are you going about addressing it?
Okay, so the first thing we're working on right now is we do have a level of service pilot underway with our water and waste department. Not underway, hopefully soon will be underway. And we're wanting to start with the water and waste department, and what we're hoping is to have a repeatable process and approach to public engagement and costing of level of service that we can apply to the other service areas across the city. So that would be probably, that's our biggest priority right now. And the next thing that we've been doing some work on is establishing better risk processes around our assets, and having something like, one of our issues is consistency across the organization. There's a lot of great work being done throughout departments, but everybody's doing it a little bit differently. So we're trying to take the approach of a lot of working groups and getting subject matter experts from across the organization, not just asset managers, maintenance staff, maintenance planners, engineers, finance people, to see what we have, what best practices we have within the city that we can use across other departments, because we find if we can actually build off something that's existing, we get better buy-in and we get a lot farther with what we're trying to do. And there is a lot of great work across the organization with the breadth of services and the number of people across. And we have a lot of people that are really passionate about asset management and talking the talk and, you know, really working to encourage others within their service areas.
And Cynthia, we were just talking to among, you know, Valerie, Chris, and Lindsay, and some of their challenges were a lot to do with like organizational change management. And what is your experience with respect to organizational change as you guys or your team is rolling out these changes with asset management capabilities?
Yeah, change management is huge. It's one of the asset management enablers, right? This is something we talk about a lot. And your success of any asset management initiative and any that I participated in across the city really rely on your change management approach and the strategies you have there. So that's actually something we built into our staff. For every objective that we have, we will be developing change management strategies to, you know, figure out how to move those forward. Like, for example, with level of service, you know, we can't just take levels of service and put them in front of the council and say, you need to approve these. We need to spend time educating them on what levels of service are, what the benefits are, what the benefits are of costing those levels of service. Same with managers across departments, like starting with water and waste. One of the first steps there will be getting in front of their managers and talking to them to make sure they're on board and understanding the benefits, because this is going to take time from them and from their staff, and everybody's got full-time jobs and lots of priorities. So yeah, the change management piece is very important, and you can't move on to any of these initiatives without addressing that and updating that.
Absolutely, yeah. Sorry, just a quick question there, Bonnie, while we're on the subject. Val mentioned about where the asset management team sits within the organization. So Val's obviously is working within engineering department. I think you sit under that. Just quickly for the other three of you, where do your asset management department sit, and is it the optimal place? So I think the audience might want to hear that, especially those among them that are looking to maybe start their own department. So Cynthia, Chris, Lindsay, let's go.
Okay, so we do have a corporate asset management office that reports into the office of the CAO. But then in addition to that, we have departmental asset management, or asset managers, pardon me, in each of the departments that typically report into the director of that department.
Okay, and are you looking to improve that? That sounds like a good place for it to be set up. Is that fair to say?
It's generally pretty good. The intention when it was originally set up was that the reporting would be all into the corporate asset management office. Just, you know, alignment of priorities, that sort of thing. Just because within the departments, again, lots of priorities within those departments. So a lot of these asset managers are doing a lot of other work as well. But it is, you know, what it is. And overall, I think it is working very well, but that certainly would make it easier if we had that direct reporting and alignment to corporate.
Okay, same question, Chris.
Sure, yeah. So Metro Vancouver recently created a new department called Project Delivery because of the, you know, tens of billions of, you know, capital spending in the next decade. So, so asset management function has been consolidated into this department. So the benefit, of course, is a centralized functions that is independent from the implementing departments, so that we can apply sort of the standard framework as from sort of the, you know, third person perspective.
Maybe having network challenges with Chris now. Maybe we pause with Chris and go to Lindsay. And Chris?
Sure. The way EPCOR has it set up is for our water group, we have a central asset management office, which basically does standards, frameworks, and provides support to everyone, both in terms of, here's the risk matrix you will use, here's the condition grade scale you will use, here's how you will set things up. But then each business unit, so the water treatment plants and the wastewater treatment plants, drainage and water D&T, then how it particularly gets implemented in each business group is a little bit different. To add on to this complexity, we're also going through a massive effort right now to completely revamp and standardize the way capital projects are delivered across all of EPCOR Water. So a lot of the asset management initial bits and pieces, in terms of long-term planning, short-term planning, annual budgeting is getting kind of wrapped up in that. So again, slight differences across the different business units, but that kind of central source of here's the basic standards everybody needs to meet are kind of centrally imposed. So It's working, but we do find that the end result is different groups focused on different things that are more important to them at that particular time. So the maturity levels of the various different aspects of asset management are kind of all over the place as a result. But we are all speaking the same language and using the same reference points. So even though, the wastewater treatment plant may be further ahead in terms of formal plans, and the water treatment plant may be ahead in their data management, everything's tied back to the same principles. So you can at least do a little bit of comparison, and once everything's built up, it should be comparable.
Okay.
I was wondering, Chris, are you back online and on audio? Okay, so maybe we'll just continue.
Looks like he's just joining back in, so give him a second, I think.
Maybe I'll just add something. I'm not sure there's one right place for an asset management team in any organization. I think it really does depend on the organization, and maybe a big part of that is the culture of the organization. I think it wouldn't matter at all if the culture is quite engaging and collaborative. I think it really doesn't matter where you sit in the organization. I think you can achieve the outcomes of the program. I think the challenge for us is not so much that aspect, but I think that there's a misinterpretation of what we mean when we talk about asset management, that it's just a project and it's not a project. It's a system. It's an approach. It can define the way we do our business, but getting folks to understand that we're not trying to introduce something new. We're trying to work with them. And I think, Lindsay, you were talking about, leveraging, or maybe it was you, Cynthia, sorry, I can't remember, but it was about leveraging what's already being done and building on that, and, maybe you look a little bit outside of the organization because, somebody else has something great. How can I fold that in to give us the best solution for our organization?
Yeah, I really agree with that. Like the structure isn't always the most important thing. And I think we come across people within the organization that don't have asset management in their title, and, they're proponents of it and they're wanting to get involved. And I mean, I think that is important. Yes, the positions with asset management in the title were where we started, but the thing is, asset management is far reaching. You need your finance people and your IT people and your operations. So, everyone does need to be involved.
Okay,
Chris,
thank you. Yeah, Chris is back in the game.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. Yeah, it's not raining in Vancouver for the record, but I don't know about my internet connection as being unstable a bit. So yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly.
You would put up with this level of service, Chris, eh?
Right. So yeah, I don't know when I dropped off, but yeah, basically our asset management function is within a project delivery department. That's a newly formed department that's independent from the implementing department. So I think it's a good place to facilitate these asset management discussions with these client department, we say, and the finance and the CAO and So yeah, I think we are very excited to function and provide the centralized services within asset management. But I totally agree with Valerie that, you know, it's really, department is just a department, right? It's really defining the right sort of champions within asset management. And back to the governance model, I think as long as we form the right governance model that involves the right people, I think that's a really good starting point and continuum of asset management conversations and influence.
Yeah, I agree with you guys for sure. I found it interesting. Some of the earlier asset management setups in municipalities tended to be out of the finance department, and when they were really just an asset valuation setup is what it seemed to be. It was like PSAB plus or something like that, and there has been a migration to it becoming independent or an asset management team in their own right. And I agree to some extent with Val. It doesn't matter where, you just need the right people in the right impetus and organizational on board to get your progress.
That's right. So we heard a lot about, you know, like governance, data, normalization of data, standardization of definitions. We heard of organizational change management, the asset management office and where it sits. So, you know, if you were to start your asset management journey again, and, you know, this is a question always that, you know, the audience is always interested in because everyone's in various aspects of their journey. What would be some of the lessons learned, the things that you would want to change or give advice to the folks that are embarking into this journey now? Maybe we're going to start with Cynthia.
Okay. Well, that's always a tough question. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, right? So we can always do better if we got to redo. I find when looking back at what we've done, the first thing I like to do, and with the larger asset management group, is to look at the wins and to look at what we've achieved. Just because it's easy to forget, there's so much to do, but I think we've all made a lot of progress, and that's always, you know, the place to start. But if we could go back and make some changes, I think for us, one of the bigger things would be starting a little bit smaller. I find everybody's really ambitious at the get-go, and we set all kinds of objectives and targets. And if you're not careful, you can be not setting yourselves up for failure, but overwhelming people. And, you know, it's almost better, I think, to pick some key areas to focus on and really do it well and show some excellent steps, show some wins, show people the value of asset management, and then continue to build from there. And I think then too, it might be easier to keep people engaged as you're moving through it, and a little bit more involved. So that's one thing we've learned. And I know when we wrote this stamp this time, we've had roadmaps and we've had objectives in the past, but we really, really focused on what we could do given the situation we're in, given the time that our asset managers and our subject matter experts across the organization would have. And we really feel that these are things we can achieve within the next 3 years.
Great. So it's like celebrating the success along the way and recognizing the benefits along the way. I totally agree, because these journeys are usually multi-year, and then there's that factor of really adoption and then realizing the benefits. So I think setting these micro milestones and celebrating success is hugely important. Valerie, anything to add to lessons learned?
Yeah, thanks. I think, Cynthia, those are great points. We often forget about all the progress that we've made when we're looking forward to things that still have to come. And sometimes stopping and reflecting on the achievements is a great way to start that conversation for how we move forward. I think one of the other things that I try and impress others with is that asset management is a continuous improvement program. It really doesn't end. So you could conceivably start anywhere in that spectrum and, you know, advance the ball as far as you can and then move on to something else. And then as more information or knowledge becomes available, you can circle back and make some improvements. So it's just, I don't like thinking of it as a checklist type of arrangement where did that, don't have to look at that ever again. I think it has to be on a continuum, and we do need to, follow the Deming cycle and plan, do, check, act. That's just the natural order of things. The one thing I think for us that would have been really helpful looking back, though, is having a stronger policy and governance, and maybe just the organizational culture about what we're trying to achieve. And I think we initially kind of got started on it as everyone else is doing asset management, we should say we're doing that too. And I think it evolved into something much more. And but it's been difficult to sometimes navigate. And again, back to what I said before, that it's often seen as a project rather than a system or an approach. And so it's easy to shove it off into the distance rather than trying to get it embedded into the way that we think about things. And one of our directors actually made a really good observation when we were talking about levels of service, and that was that we need to make thinking about asset management similar to the way that we think about safety, so that when we're looking at a project or an asset, that we are looking with that lens of how do I improve this for the future? How do I look at my OPEX, CAPEX expenditures? How do I ensure I'm delivering the service with this asset that my customers are expecting? So I think that's a really kind of unique way of moving things forward.
That's very interesting. Lindsay, any lessons learned to offer to the audience here?
Sure. I guess to tie into Valerie's point about thinking about asset management frameworks like you do a health and safety framework, 10 years ago when EPCOR first started this journey, that was the initial approach. We've implemented ISO 14001 and 45001. We have health and safety and environmental frameworks. How hard can it be to put together an asset management framework? Turns out it was a lot more difficult because people have an innate understanding of what you need to do for health and safety and what you need to do for environmental compliance. And even though asset management, the individual specific tasks that are involved are things that your maintenance department is doing, your operations group is doing, your finance group is doing, your capital group is doing, nobody thinks about it as asset management the same way they think about it as health and safety. So trying to build this framework from scratch was a miserable failure. It did not work. No one was engaged. Everyone hated it. So we switched to looking at an approach that focused on short-term quick wins, like Cynthia was saying, here's an immediate thing we can do, and then use that to build up the framework. It's this specific group has a problem with the condition of the chains in the clarifiers. Okay, well, we can take that and then use that to build up a condition grade system. And then that can be implemented because we've shown it works. And the people who used it like it and they're happy with it. And now they can take it and they can use it in different parts. So we found that theoretically it should be just like a health and safety or an environmental framework, but people didn't have that innate understanding. One of the other big mistakes we made was, again, we bit off way more than we could chew, and we decided that we would buy a optimization software tool. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, and we have great models, but our data isn't any good, and it's not organized in the right way. So when we use the test data, everyone is super excited because we get these great results and it makes sense. And look at all the things we can do. Look how we can compare. Look how we can decide that this project in water D&T will reduce our risk for the same amount of money versus this project in the water plants. But when we take our data, which is not consistent, which has not been checked, which we don't have any confidence in, and we put it into the model, we get results that don't seem to make any sense. They don't align with what people expect to see because the data hasn't been validated. And so we had all this momentum and then it just kind of crashed because we got our results, but you don't get good results if you don't have good data. So going back and probably, again, starting small, biting off little tiny pieces and building rather than going for the big flashy model probably would have been a bit more of a sustainable way to build up to it.
Great points. I like that. Chris?
So back to those challenges that I mentioned, and so as other people, around the governance model, it would be really nice if there's a sort of a good understanding, like genuine interest in asset management from the top, so that we have corporate asset management champions and a very strong engagement from the top, so that there's a sort of strong buy-in to the initiative. And it's not just one small initiative, as Valerie said. It's more of the way you manage your utility, right? So it should be the core work of what we do, instead of an add-on, right, to what we do on top of those day-to-day firework, right? So I think that will be very helpful to communicate around the value and benefits on the asset management. So we recently used some of the asset management graphics in our capital planning discussions. Like, for example, we're tracking sanitary overflow SSO, a number of SSOs in the historical numbers in the bar charts, and we also have sort of projection of that count. And we have some of the projects to build, the temporary storage facilities to store these SSOs sewage. So that will definitely lower our projections, and that's how we communicate, hey board, like we need this money to reduce one of these customer levels of service metrics. And that has become very effective way to communicate upwards. So our CAO very appreciated around our effort to keep tracking those type of information. So, and that become a very interesting sort of conversation between the GMs and the senior managers, so that we can continue tracking those informations, so that we can better justify our spending going forward, right? So that's one area. The second area is around, of course, around the data. I think Lindsay and Cynthia and Valerie all repeated there, but it's a more of how we collect the data and why we collect the data, right? The adequacy and currency of those data. So that will generate sort of the interest and needs from the staff level to collect the right data, so that in the right place, so that we can maximize the value of those data for further analytics and reporting. And those two are sort of key points that I would emphasize if we're able to redo our asset management journey.
Awesome.
Can I just build on something Lindsay said just about the asset information? It stood out to me, and putting systems in place, because I know a lot of times when I talk to people who are newer in their asset management journeys, and right away they talk about putting an asset management system in place and IT systems in place and work management systems. And yeah, the systems are wonderful, but I also find, we haven't been able to do that, to get funding to do those systems. But at the same time, I feel over the years, we've gotten a much better understanding of our data, the data we need, and what we would need in a system. I almost feel like if we had gone out and bought one a few years ago, and I have some experience with this from my days in wastewater. We had a CWMS, and we didn't utilize probably 75% of the functionality because we bought it and implemented it before we really understood what we needed and what we needed it to do. So, I mean, as years went on, we did figure that out, and we started adding functionality and those sorts of things. But I think there's value in really focusing on understanding your data and your data needs before jumping into something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. So in terms of the what you would do more of or what you would do again, just to summarize quickly: start small, show value early, strong governance in policy, and use wins in actions to build your framework was a good piece from you, Lindsay. I like that. Convey the approach concept, not the project, and data and business process before software. So get your data in order, then you get the software, then you get the best benefit out of the back end. The results, the outputs align with expectations, so you keep building the confidence. That's what I was hearing through that. Senior management support, I mentioned at the very beginning, the leadership walking the walk, or whatever that I had that way around. And communicate the value of AM, so the analytics, reporting, making sure that the infographics and that kind of thing to make it real and tangible, I think is really important. We've spoke a lot today about change, culture, that kind of thing. We've talked a fair bit about data and how it relates to software. We got 20 minutes left, so I have a question which switches up a little bit, but it's really building on what we talked about earlier, prioritizing asset needs, integration of departments, and working out almost one of the dreams of where we want to get to with asset management is to be able to prioritize assets within a corridor, different assets. And then also we've got Lindsay, who's facilities based, and Cynthia, you mentioned you worked at a treatment plant as well, or have some experience there. So the facility bundling prioritization is even more difficult. So maybe if we ask Val, Chris, Cynthia, Lindsay in that order, Val and Chris to talk a little bit about maybe corridor planning. So how you prioritize within a corridor, looking at your water, wastewater, stormwater, roads, that kind of thing. And it's a bit different for you, Val. And then how you might go about it when on the facility, the vertical assets with Cynthia and Lindsay. And if that ends up being marker pens in maps, that's not going to be a surprise to many people. And touch on where you wanted to get to. So starting with Val.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good topic. So we don't do corridor management per se, but we do look at what is a priority for each of the individual systems and look for opportunities where we can kind of bundle the activity, whatever we can in a corridor. We also work quite closely with HRM, the Halifax, the City of Halifax, and their streets renewal programs. So that drives some of our own capital, and they will give us their list of capital street renewals. We will use that to get out and do our investigations for CCTV, and then look at anything that we need to do, so that we're not they're not paving the road and then we're coming in next year and ripping it up for a sewer repair. Now that doesn't work so nicely for water. Water, we can't always predict when a water main break is going to happen, so sometimes we do, I guess, inconvenience the ratepayers because road was paved and then water main break happens. But we're looking at a variety of different tools that can help us with more predictive analytics for what factors might influence those water main breaks in the future and how we can apply that to our overall capital planning. And then in general, we have a capital planning process where each of the master plan derives the starting point for some of the projects that are coming up in the next cycle. We have our engineering and operations staff bring forward other projects that need to be considered, and then we kind of go through an iterative process for how we determine what is actually going to end up in the capital budget. And one of those decision points is around what can be integrated in the corridor. So we don't do anything, there's no black box that we feed everything into and it spits out the perfect algorithm, but we do have an iterative process. And I don't envision that we would ever get to a point where we would just have a black box solution. I think we would have potentially a black box solution that would give us a starting point for those conversations that has a bit more transparency and justification for why project A is at the top of the list. And then we would still have those further conversations with engineering and operations.
How about a see-through box, Val, when you could see exactly the decision-making process, but it was formalized in software to some extent, maybe?
Yeah, and I think there is a bit of resistance internally, really, because the response we get is, we don't want a black box telling me what to do. I know what needs to be done. I don't need your help, that kind of thing. So we have to build a process that still enables that engagement. We still have some kind of a standardized approach that when we get asked by our regulator and others, that we can point to and say, look, this is the logic that we use for coming up with the short list, and then we go through this second iteration that sort of screens out things, and then ultimately we're working within a funding envelope. So that's the hard stop every year.
Even a technical question, it comes back to people, doesn't it?
It always comes back to people.
Chris.
Yeah, so Metro Vancouver owns and operates basically the highways of water mains and the sewer collectors, right? And each municipal members, they branch off from those highways to provide, water and sewer services to their residents. So, and then we don't have a transportation or the road network in our portfolio. So in terms of corridor management, similar to LA, we don't have a, the corridor management that sort of look at, paving programs and our pipe replacement. But that said, we communicate and engage closely with our municipal members. We share our capital program, the maps of, where the project is happening and duration of those projects, so that they can combine their sort of payment programs and their sort of distribution line replacement program. So we're kind of doing it with our municipal members that way. And also we have a prioritization, like project prioritization tool that looks at different aspects of the projects and that links to the levels of service and how important or critical certain project is compared to other projects. And that prioritization framework is both for linear and vertical assets. So we have that going that will support the senior managers to make decisions around, to defer certain projects or accelerate other projects depending on the needs and sort of political interest as well. That plays a big role. And sometimes when a project is created based on maintenance needs, say if there's a lot of leaks and failure of a pipe, but then when planning group reviews that line, and if there's a strong growth, sort of population growth is happening in the region, then they sort of upgrade that project into a growth program. So we kind of going back and forth in terms of the program assignments and how we maintain the reliability hour and the integrity of our systems, because we're seeing a lot of growth in our region, and that's a big part of our water capital program, for example. So that sort of sums up of how we manage our capital projects on the linear assets.
Okay, thanks. Cynthia, like if you have specific around linear and it's something to discuss there, don't just stick to the vertical of the treatment plant. And if it can relate back to anything level of service, you mentioned you had a project around level of service, and there was a question from the audience asking if you've defined your level of service yet in the performance measures. So maybe touch on that too.
Okay. So I'll start with the level of service piece. We haven't defined those yet, or the measures. I mean, I think we have some, obviously, and I think in water and waste they're maybe a little bit easier to set, just with all of the regulatory aspects that really dictates a lot of your, especially your technical service levels. But with respect to how we prioritize capital needs within the wastewater treatment plants, we actually do it's really based on risk assessments that are done multiple times a year. So we have what we call asset replacement and refurbishment programs for the wastewater treatment plants. We also have them for the water treatment. And within that, there is a risk assessment done on the various assets within the facility, looking at a number of factors, condition, criticality, legislative requirements, potential impact to the public, those sorts of things. And these risk assessments are done multiple times a year. And then these are used to feed into our capital maintenance program. So these would be put into the budget and prioritized there. But the nice thing about these programs is we've always got a prioritized list kind of ready to go, but it also gives you that flexibility that when things come up, when emergencies happen, you do have that flexibility to reallocate if need be. So this is another area we're kind of building on. Our water and waste does it very well, and we spent some time looking at capital programs this year, and how we define them and how we structure them. And actually the risk assessment piece is something we're going to be asking for across the city now for prioritizing investments within these capital maintenance programs before they even go into our budget prioritization process.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. And Lindsay?
To touch on the levels of service, a lot of the levels of service that we're working with are basically set with our agreement with the city. They're really high level, so sometimes it's a challenge to tie them to individual assets to prioritize. Like Cynthia was mentioning, we have essentially equipment rehab and replacement programs split up by asset type, so mechanical, electrical, so on. we're really good at generating projects and creating this backlog of projects that then can be moved forward or up. The piece we're not doing very well that we're working on, and I might be contacting Cynthia after this to see exactly how her risk assessment process works, is we're not necessarily great about capturing that risk data and then keeping that with the project. So we'll have the name of the project, we'll have a preliminary scope, and we'll have a preliminary cost, but we've got no way that's documented and easy to find that prioritizes them. So our program managers shift and change. You inherit a list of 30 projects. You know what they're for, but you don't really know why you would do project A versus project B. And so that's the piece that we're really focusing on in the next little while. We're also moving a lot of our planning and that risk identification process from our capital group back to the engineering group and as part of the planning process. So it's an area where we're not quite where we want to be, but we kind of think we know where we need to go, and it's documenting that risk, because otherwise the prioritization exercise is basically you send a list of projects to a group of senior managers and say, what do you want to do? And really the information they have is a list of project titles, and you can't make good decisions that way.
Appreciate it. No, it's definitely, it's a very difficult thing to be able to do well. So I know that it's kind of a mature asset management goal to be able to get there, but it's something that needs to happen whether you have a system in place or not. So that was kind of the reason for the question. And there's been a couple of comments from audience members as well asking about how that happens at your organization. So I'll Bonnie, if there's anything you wanted to ask to finish up, or we're getting close to the end. So
yeah, I think we have 3 minutes before we hand it back to Hans to close off. So I think the final question, and you know, it's more towards helping you, like helping us help you in a way, is what can, you know, organizations like the Institute of Asset Management, how can us help you in terms of in your asset management journey? Let's say, what are you looking for these kind of organizations to provide in terms of information and frameworks to be able to help you along with this journey? And maybe I'll pick on Cynthia.
Okay. I think as far as how it helps or can help, I know for us, actually, it's actually when I first got more involved, I guess, with IAM was when we started writing our SAMs, and we were looking for how to structure and what type of framework. So we actually relied on the conceptual model and the maturity assessment, and we will be using those on an ongoing basis. So that was nice. And what also helps with the information you provide is it gives that extra layer of credibility to what we're saying too. When we can go to decision makers and senior managers and say, okay, here's information from, you know, a globally recognized organization. It's not just me saying it, it's also kind of supporting what I'm saying. So to me, that's been invaluable. And then obviously things like this, being able to meet people from across Canada, across the world, who are, you know, at different stages in their journey, and being able to share our experiences and knowledge, that's really great. And I mean, with Manitoba starting our IAM chapter, it will be also nice to, you know, reach out to people that are, you know, potentially down the street, and, you know, we can have a conversation and see where we can help each other.
Great. Valerie?
Thank you. Cynthia, great points. The first one that comes to mind is that lending credibility to the work that we're trying to do, having somewhere where we can reference that this isn't something we dreamed up, you know, this is actually an industry practice, and here's why others are doing it, and this is why we should be doing it. So I think that's wonderful. There are some really wonderful resources as well that IAM puts out. The videos are really helpful. James, you were using the, you know, snapshots of the overall journey, and I think that whole video is really quite informative. If people are interested in paying attention all the way through, it's a little bit long for some people's attention span, but I do think it is, even if you broke it up into components, if you were trying to focus on one area. So there's great information there. It also provides guidance to us. So it, you know, we have things that we can use as a reference perspective. So I think, and the last piece, again, opportunities for us to reach out. I've heard so many good things today from the panelists that I envision I will be reaching out to them, and likely there will be people that are listening to us that may be reaching back to us. So I think that is part of building the practice overall, and I think it adds great value to the industry of asset management.
Yeah, and that building that community of practice is so important because this journey continues to evolve, and we're learning more about the various different similar industries of like assets, and also the not so similar industries, but very similar types of requirements. So I think that community of practice is so important. And with COVID, although we're doing all of these events now virtually, it does lend its benefit. We're able to now connect all of us across Canada versus usually we're connecting more locally. I want to hear also from Chris in terms of not just what is working for you, what IAM provides, but what else can we do, let's say, because we are building a knowledge pillar as well, and it would be great to also see how we can continue to offer value also in terms of as you guys are going through your respective journeys.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what the points that Cynthia and Valerie made. So instead of echoing that, I want to switch our gears slightly and more of a sort of technical side of doing an asset management sort of reporting and analytics. It'll be really powerful to build some sort of a database that will have some standard asset information, like asset deterioration curve, the replacement value of certain asset in a unit cost basis, estimated service life. Like these are some of the key analytic pieces that we use very often, but it's very hard to find the most recent and practical sort of information related to these topics. Like we are trying to create this database on our own, but then our database is so limited in terms of statistical analytics or regression testing. So it'll be really nice if IAM, like an organization like IAM, can somehow consolidate all the asset information available out there, because I know a couple of utilities are sort of initiating these type of projects, but it will be very nice to sort of put everything in one place so we can sort of access those informations for smart analytics and more of a sort of a big data approach. Great,
that's a great suggestion. And Lindsay, you have maybe less than 1 minute.
Okay, to echo what everybody else said, the other thing I really enjoy about it is when we first started our asset management journey, the ISO 55000 standard did not exist. We were working off the British PAS 55 standard. So just having, the fact that it's now an ISO standard, again, it brings that legitimacy to it. One of the other organizations I'm involved with, PMAC, the Plant Engineering and Maintenance Council of Canada, also has a big asset management focus. So I like having the two groups to compare. Again, it's that additional legitimacy. It's different options for training. Am I trying to reach maintenance people versus engineers versus corporate finance? It's options and being able to have different ways to approach different people in my organization. Yeah, just with the different information that's available.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of your time today. Oh, that's my dog barking now. So, so Eric is, oops. So now I invite Hans back oh, you want to just mute myself? Hans, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Bonnie. I'd just like to thank Valerie and Chris and Cynthia and Lindsay for your comments and your thoughts this afternoon. It's been fantastic. My background is really in the real estate and housing sector, and just like I said, the last event that we held, I learned so much. And it's although we theme these events, and this one obviously is the water infrastructure theme, but I really see the benefit of sort of that cross-functional learning in these events. So thank you very much for your time and your words that you shared today. In closing, I'd just like to bring everyone up, remind everyone, if you will, on the events that are coming in the near future. So as Bonnie mentioned, we have the AGM on Wednesday, July 14th. And then following that, towards the end of the summer, we have our third event in our 2021 webinar series. And that event's going to be on the subject of power generation and distribution. It's going to occur early in September. We haven't quite set the date yet. We were originally thinking of sort of the end of August, but due to vacations and so forth and so on, we're going to set that date within the first 2 weeks of September is when that event is going to occur. So stay posted for that. The last event that I'd like to announce is the North American Asset Management Conference. That will take place on October 12th through to the 14th. And you might all also just be aware that we're going to be calling for papers within the next few weeks. So, you know, if you go to the IM website, you can certainly go to the im.org and find out anything about the Canadian events and the call for papers as well. So with that, I'd like to bring this meeting to a close. Thank you very, very much again, all the sponsors, the participants, and you as the those that you know registered and listened in today. So wish you the best. If we don't see you at the AGM, you have a great summer, and we'll look forward to seeing you in early September. Thank you very much.